Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we're talking about Undine. Or in English I suppose we pronounce it Undine.
Yes.
But it's the name of a character in this German film, German-French film. It's a romantic fantasy drama directed by Christian Petzold, whose last film we saw, Transit, which we both really liked.
Yes.
And that was essentially a World War II period drama, although the actual setting was slightly displaced in time. But it was about trying to leave a European country that was being taken over. And it was incredibly evocative. And that starred the same two stars of this, Paula Beer and Franz Rogowski.
Yeah.
Franz Rogowski is like a German Joaquin Phoenix, the way he looks and feeling that he connects with his face and with his whole ambience.
And she has to be the most beautiful woman in movies at the moment, actually.
So this is based on the Undine, which I wasn't that aware of before we watched this, and I've been looking it up because I said, what's Undine? I know Undine with an O, and where do I know that from? And the answer is I know it kind of from fairytale, but it feels like an ancient mythological figure, and it's not quite. I think it emerged in like the 1500s, and then it was developed in literature and art in the 1800s, and things like The Little Mermaid kind of used.
I know it because there was a film, it was a play by Girardot, and it was also a film with Audrey Hepburn, and it was also a ballet that Margaret Fontaine would do.
It's been kind of used and adapted a lot, but from what I can tell from reading around it, it's not that codified. Like if you think about something like a vampire or a troll or something, those are quite codified kind of figures.
No, because also it's meant to be the Little Mermaid in the Hans Christian Andersen tale is meant to be an Undine figure.
Exactly.
And I can't quite connect it with the angry elemental that you see.
Yeah, so what it is, it's an elemental figure that's associated with the elements of water. If you think about the four, earth, water, what are the elements? Whatever they are.
Fire, air.
That's it. The Undine is the one associated with water. And there are things associated with the Undine to do with love. If it comes on, it's a kind of liminal figure. It lives between the water and the land. And if it comes onto land, it can gain a soul by getting married to a human, this kind of thing. But these things are not that codified from what I can tell. And this film has its own version of the way
Yeah, and I think
works.
we need to ignore all of that background, actually, and kind of just begin dealing with what the film shows us, and then kind of trying to make sense of that, actually.
Yeah, so Undine in this, the character, begins with a breakup. Her boyfriend has broken up with her at a cafe, and she's very upset about it. And she leaves the conversation with the words, or she said to the guy as he leaves, "If you leave, I'll have to kill you," which is quite threatening.
It's a fantastic beginning, right? She's basically saying, I have to go now, but I'll be back. I have my break in half an hour, and if you're not here waiting for me, I'll have to kill you.
Yeah, and exactly what she means by that and how serious that is not clear at the start. She seems to mean it quite sincerely.
Yeah.
She doesn't mean it as a joke. And the meaning of that ultimately becomes clear as the film develops. But she then falls into a relationship with a deep-sea diver. This is the Franz Rogowski character.
Undine comes back after threatening her boyfriend that if he's not there, she'll kill him. And, at that very meeting, this young man comes up to her, tells her how much he loved her talk and would she like to have coffee with him. In the meantime, he's very clumsy, so he ends up pushing against the wall, and a whole fish tank falls on top of them. And they fall in love. And actually, I thought those scenes were absolutely marvelous, right? So they fall in love, and they can't, they're crazy in love, and they can't stop touching each other, and, they're kind of communicating perfectly, and the scenes are full of joy, him walking, running in the tube to catch every last sight of her. I thought all of that was like so romantic and beautiful, and you get a sense, actually, something that it made me realize when watching it that's missing, how much of falling in love is really about tactility, about affection, about, also being seen or sharing a world or a view or being understood, this kind of communication. yeah, but that is also kind of conveyed physically, yeah. You know, it's like people can't stop holding hands or touching each other, or yeah, kind of. And I think this film does it beautifully. And actually, it's not related to sex. Yeah, I mean, there's also sex, right? But the moments that I'm talking about is just like they're walking down the street and they're all curled into each other.
They go diving together.
They go diving together. I mean, I think the film is beautiful at evoking that kind of falling in love. Yeah.
It's got an interesting thing about the city. So, Undina's job is to do with urban planning, and she shows kind of wealthy tourists these sort of models of the city and what the city will be as it's developed and this sort of thing. She talks them around it, and there's a heavy emphasis. There are long scenes where you hear her talks about the history of Berlin.
Of Berlin, yes.
And its development.
Yes.
To the point where there's a scene which is one of the sex scenes, essentially, where she and the diver character, Christoph, are in bed together, and he kind of spurns her physical advances and says, no, I want to hear your talk that you're going to give tomorrow. And so there's this, it sexualizes this talk, and he hears her, and he says, I like hearing you speak, you're smart and you're kind, and I thought, this is quite silly, and then started to understand actually what this character was feeling, why he wanted to hear her give this speech. And I thought it was interesting as well that there are 2 points in the film. One is in the talk that she gives at the start, where characters look at the model of that city and they recognise a place in it, and then they imagine the figure that they desire in it. So at the start, it's the ex-boyfriend who's just split up with her. She looks at the church and she gets lost for a minute because she sees him there. It kind of reminded me of... I think it was How I Met Your Mother. I think there was and it's in a comedic context because it's a sitcom. There was a storyline in that for an episode about a character the guy could no longer hang out with. It was about places in New York City that the character could no longer go because they'd split up with someone, and they were that was their regular haunts. So you had this map, and it had like all these areas shaded in red. I can no longer go to this neighborhood because I might see her there, and it kind of made me think about like the way that these spaces become personalized, as they do in this, right? So in that it's comedic, in this it's romantic. The feeling of the person just seeing the model of the building that they sit outside stops her in her tracks that he might be there. And the same goes for Christoph, I think it is, later on in the film. Imagines the same thing.
Well, I think the film has a whole narrative of the development of Berlin and the East and the West. So, the barrier, which can also, I think, be read as a barrier between, the water nymph and the real person. And also then the bridging of that barrier and the design of spaces so that they're fit for purpose. And, kind of this whole thing about form following function in the reconstruction of the palace, that had first been destroyed in the bombs, and that the communists didn't want to rebuild. And then the city kind of convinced its citizens to rebuild it, by putting up a facade, an image. But then actually the function of it was different than what was originally intended. So, and I think the film's story has to be read along those terms, the separation between nymph and people. Is there a space for nymphs? Can you repurpose it? Kind of. I do think that all of those things are connected, and I'm not sure how to read the answer, because what happens is that Undine sacrifices herself for the man she loves. So kind of there's a connection between her returning to the water and him being able to breathe again, giving up her bodily form, her earthly form. So she sacrifices her life for his, which actually kind of makes also more sense of the ending.
So what do you make of the ending?
Well, the ending is that, he's wanted to do the same for her, but actually she returns him their token of love so that he can start, he can get on with his life, which is...
with his pregnant girlfriend.
With his pregnant girlfriend. So I think the two things are also tied with honesty and truth and deceit. Kind of the ex-boyfriend is bad not only because he left her, but because he deceived her, and because he used her, and so on, right? And actually, their relationship is put at risk because of her lie, right?
Yeah.
So I think those elements are also there.
The direction and the tone really interested me because it has this very kind of clean look and feel to it, and editing, and which, it made me think, like, I really associate Germany in quite a banal way with sort of coldness and efficiency and Vorsprung technique and all that kind of stuff, and not romance. But of course, it's like, this is the land of fairy tales. This is where the Brothers Grimm come from.
It's hyper romantic,
right? Exactly. So, like, I never really think about it
German
in that sense.
Romanticism, dying of love,
exactly,
swoony thing. And actually,
it's never the first thing I associate with it, but it's absolutely there, and it's true of this film as well.
It's very much in that tradition. I mean, this is a swoonily romantic film.
Nonetheless, it's still told. When I say at a distance, maybe that's not quite fair, but it has. I like the combination of realism with the fairy tale. It reminds me actually of like Let the Right One In or Border, which we saw, which are both Swedish films. They have that kind of, they're not florid about their fantasy, they're grounded. And they say, what if this were in a real life context, a modern context that we recognise?
I think it's very sparse and economical, but also very fluid. It moves beautifully. It has a fantastic use of colour and incredibly fluid use of long takes. Where kind of, the camera's always mobile, but the character is never out of reach. It's always kind of focused on the protagonist. But I think it's also sparse in the sense that it's not florid. You never get more than you need to understand. And I love that about the film. That kind of So for example, when the water tank, the fish tank, falls on them, right, and the camera stays a little bit too long, so that you understand the moment and its significance, and kind of what it means, right? So it doesn't cut away quickly. It lingers on those faces, kind of coming to life, or coming awake.
It makes a lot of its actors' faces.
Yes.
I was really struck by the tears in Undina's eyes when she goes to see Christoph in the hospital and she's told he's brain dead, and then she's also told that you didn't have this phone conversation with him yesterday. He was already in hospital at that point. And she can't believe it, and she's distraught because of the condition he's in. The look on her face and the tears in her eyes, and she's unblinking, they're filling up her eyes, is really striking, actually really amazing.
She's wonderful. She's wonderful because all her emotions are transparent, right? But there's also something about just her face. She's so beautiful. That coloring with those like green, grey eyes. It has, kind of a particular luminosity or something, really. And then the shade of her hair and her skin. I think she's kind of, fascinating to watch. It's a face that's alive, So, I mean, I thought that was tremendous. I mean, I think this is a truly great film, actually. I mean,
I didn't think it was truly great.
I do. I mean, that's my first impression. Obviously, you never know until you see it again and you work it through properly and so on. But I loved it.
Yeah.
I was surprised too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because I remember feeling as intensely about Transit, by the way, which I thought was also great. Except then I realized I'd forgotten most of it.
Right.
And then I saw he did a version of The Postman Always Rings Twice, which is a noir, and which, I liked. But again, the ones that really stick in my memory, really, is, the Lana Turner, John Garfield version.
I think this shares with Transit, it's a personal story set amongst a very explicit, although less explicit here, but still explicit, socio-political backdrop, which is where all of those lectures come in, all of that talk about the history of Berlin.
Well, you see, I love that also because I think it's a cinema of ideas, and it uses myth, and on the other hand, is also palpably sensual. And it's a combination of those three things, kind of used in combination that I think it makes it like really, rare and beautiful. Yeah, so beautifully realized. So it's not just using those components; it's actually, expressing them beautifully. Yeah, mixing them beautifully to express.
Nonetheless, there was something about it, and maybe it's in comparison with Transit, which felt more potent to me. There's something about this that felt like a trifle.
No, I didn't think so.
Maybe I just didn't connect with the love story so much as I did the political story. But I had a love story too, which I did connect with, and maybe it was the much stronger political backdrop to that made that film more powerful to me. Maybe I just felt it was a better film.
Well, I don't know, because as I said, I mean, some of these things I still have to work, but my first impression is that, you get the thing about love and history and placement, and the there being place and the reusing of places, but, kind of places needing spaces, and spaces not always kind of being available at particular times, because, the creation of spaces also has to do with ideas, and then how this also can be related to people and types and species in the film. Yeah, so I think, and of course that can be read metaphorically as well, right? So I loved it.
I should have known you'd love it, because you love The Shape of Water, and it's that, but in German.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, actually, this is so much sparser and economical. There's no special effects. The closest you get to a special effect is, that play with the image type at the end when they're underwater, and it's obviously meant to take on a more mythic...
silent movie imagery. That's really what they look like.
Yes.
That portraiture you get in silent movies.
Yes. And it's very beautiful and it's very expressive. So I loved it. Good.
I liked it. Don't let's go overboard on these things.
I'm calling it as I see it. So I think he's one of the most interesting directors working in Europe today. I highly recommend.
I recommend. I'd see Transit first. Transit's brilliant.
There's a reason not to see both.
No, that's true. I did like in this, just quickly, I've quickly remembered, I did like in this the lampshade hanging on speaking German at the start, which is something you normally get in English language films, where, actually we saw this in Shang-Chi yesterday, where you have characters who should be speaking a different language to English. So in that, they should have been speaking Mandarin. And they were quite a lot. But also, it's an English language film. Ultimately, it's an English audience that you're going to be kind of putting it out to. So you want as much English language as possible. So you'll have the characters say, do you mind if we speak in English? In that, you had the dad saying, have you been practicing your English? As a way of basically telling the audience, oh yeah, there's context for the English that we're speaking. Now, and it also happened in Inglourious Bastards, in a way, at the start of that film, in the scene with the farmer. You had Hans Lander, the Jew hunter, saying to the farmer, I understand you speak English, could we speak in English? And it really just makes no sense why he would do that. And actually later it's contextualised as him saying, the Jews that I know are hiding under your floorboards, they don't speak English, they don't understand what we've been talking about. It makes sense of that. And in here at the start, do you want them to speak in German, because it's a German language film? And she says to this group of foreign tourists, who are clearly white, Japanese, all over the place,
we will be speaking German.
I understand, she says, I understand that you have a good command of German, so we'll speak in German if you don't mind. And it's really great. I always notice when that happens. I always think it's quite funny. But I find it charming every time.
All right. On that note, thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter. And the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Wiedersehen.